The sky was completely black, visibility was zero. As soon as the alarm sounded, 2 muffled shots rang out, and 2 guards fell to the ground. The shots continued for the next 15 minutes until everything went quiet. A voice came over the radio, announcing that the building had been cleared and was ready for evacuation. 14 years later, I found myself standing at the window of a hotel room, admiring the sunset. Memories came flooding back of how it all started and how I ended up at this moment. I took a sip of vodka, lost in thought. The burning liquid that went down my throat reflected the pain of my recent memories. Despite all this, I did not lose hope that there was still a chance for redemption. It all started 6 weeks ago when I learned the harsh truth that my wife, Jamie, with whom I had lived for 12 years, was having an affair. The discovery was accidental, as it often happens with ignorant husbands like me. My name is Logan. Jamie and I met in college and dated until graduation. While I was pursuing a career in the Marines, she was looking for a job. I was aware of my love for her, but I couldn't accept the idea of asking her to marry me while I was on indefinite military assignments. It would be unfair to her. Therefore, after serving as a Marine, I returned home 5 years later. Thanks to my military experience, I quickly found a job in a prestigious company in the sales department. My boss, also a Marine, appreciated the discipline and work ethic that military veterans bring to work. I was doing a great job and started to gain a reputation. After a while, I decided to start dating again and explored several dating sites. To my delight, I came across my college sweetheart, Jamie, on one of them. I was pleasantly surprised to see how good she looked in her photos. Jamie may not have the looks of a supermodel, but she definitely has an amazing body. During college, she was actively involved in modern dance and tried to always stay in shape. At 6 feet 3 inches, her legs resemble those of a dancer, not overly muscular, but beautifully curvy. Her figure is really impressive, with long flowing hair of rich chestnut color beautifully framing her face, with dark brown eyes and a smile that never ceases to melt my heart. She radiates charm, at the same time sweet and innocent, but with a due share of sensuality. I immediately signed up and contacted her, but it wasn't until a week later that she finally answered, asking why I had been missing for the last 5 years. If her anger at the lack of communication during my time in the Marines was any indication, then she must have missed me more than she could have guessed. It was a promising start. Our relationship blossomed quickly, and we moved smoothly from college to dating. A year later, we tied the knot, and soon our first child, Rebecca, was born. Despite my constant business trips, our family continued to grow, and 2 years later, our second daughter, Amy, was born. Now that my career is developing, we live in a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood with great schools. Although my job still requires frequent travel, sometimes up to 2 weeks a month, it is a necessary part of advancing in my field. It wasn't until a few years later that Jamie started asking when I wouldn't have to travel so much anymore. She said that she missed my presence and that she felt more confident when I was at home. I assured her that frequent travel was a necessary aspect of my job, but promised that after a while, I would be promoted to a level where I would travel less and spend more time at home. Although she accepted my explanation, she still didn't like that I went on another business trip. Looking back now, I realized that these were signs of an impending problem, but at that time, I was completely in love with my wife and trusted her, which made me ignore the first warning signs. The first sign that something was wrong was our petty quarrels when I was returning home. She was fighting over things that I couldn't control and somehow managed to dump them on me. If you were at home more often, this wouldn't happen, or we need you here, and you're traveling all over the country, she said. It took me a while to figure out what she was getting at. The second clue came when I found her new underwear in the laundry basket. While I was looking for a shirt among the clothes, there was a pair of silk panties and a matching silk top. My wife prefers casual clothes for sleeping, usually choosing a t-shirt and shorts or sweatpants if it's cool. Although I once bought her something special at the Victoria's Secret store, she only wore it once and never wore it again. I noticed several more sets of underwear in her drawer that I hadn't seen before, and I thought she'd bought them for me. The last clue was the lack of intimacy. Our usual romantic and passionate intimate life had come to a halt, and she justified herself by saying that she was not in the mood. I was exhausted myself, so I didn't think much of it at the time. I decided that as soon as my busy travel schedule slowed down, everything would return to normal. I refrained from pressuring her because I knew it wouldn't help the situation. The last proof hit me hard, and at first, I didn't want to accept it. A mutual friend of ours saw Jamie at a farmer's market in a town 40 miles from our house, holding hands with someone who wasn't me. They laughed, touched each other, and kissed, and our friend mistook this man for me because of their playful communication. When he came to greet her, he realized that she was with someone else, not with me. He quickly turned away so that he would not be noticed and walked away. Sensing that something was wrong, he decided to follow them for a bit until they got into the car and drove away. I still clearly remember that phone call. My phone rang just as I was finishing the meeting. "Hello, Logan," it was Frank. "Hi, Frank, is it urgent?" "I'm busy right now and can't talk. Can I call you back later?" With a note of concern in my tone, I asked. "I'll take care of it." "Are you sure it's not urgent?" he replied. "No, it's okay. Just call me when you can. It can wait." After finishing the conversation, I went to the next meeting without thinking too much about it, believing that it did not matter much. It wasn't until late at night that I finally called Frank back. "So, Frank, what happened? What was so important that you tried to contact me while I was unavailable?" Frank hesitated before saying, "I don't know how to tell you, but you should be aware. I ran into your wife the other day, and she wasn't alone." He paused, waiting for my answer. "What do you mean? Was she with a friend?" I asked, feeling awkward. "When I saw them together, at first, I thought it was you with her. But as I got closer, I realized that this was not the case. They acted like a couple, holding hands, laughing, and even kissing," he explained. "I don't want to break the bad news, Logan, but I think she might be having an affair." Those words made me numb. "Why do you think that? We have a happy marriage. She has no reason to do that." I couldn't even finish that thought. And then the evidence I had stumbled upon earlier suddenly made sense, but I still denied it. Frank brought me back to reality. "Look, Logan, I know this is hard for you to hear, but I think you should find out about this as soon as possible. There may still be a chance to save your relationship. Just let me know if you need anything," he added. "Good, thanks, Frank. I'll keep you posted," I replied, trying to think things through. I interrupted the call and sat on the bed, wondering if this was really happening or if it was just a cruel prank. The more I thought about it, the more plausible the story seemed. Lately, my wife has been acting aloof when I was at home. The thought of her cheating on me made me furious. I couldn't resist the urge to confront the man who slept with my wife, but during the flight home, I managed to calm down and focus on what steps I needed to take next. I still lacked concrete evidence of her infidelity, and I didn't know where to start. As soon as the plane landed, I called Frank to get more information. He confirmed that he had seen them together, and I couldn't wait to find out more about the man she was with. Keeping our marital problems a secret from my daughters was my main task. I was hoping to save our marriage and our family. Frank warned me against impulsive actions, referring to a friend who found himself in a similar situation. It would be wise to talk to get advice on how to deal with this situation. "I wouldn't want you to get into trouble or make the situation worse," Frank's words resonated with me. It became clear that I needed to take a step back and seek advice from someone who had been in a similar situation and could offer valuable ideas on how to confirm or deny my suspicions of my wife's infidelity. The best course of action at the moment would be to return home and act as if nothing had happened. If she feels that you are up to something, it will be more difficult to gather evidence against her. I hope my suspicions are unfounded, but the events of that day are still fresh in my memory. When I returned home, I managed to regain my composure so that I could communicate normally with Jamie and the girls. It wasn't easy, but I managed somehow. In the days that followed, I searched the house for any hints or evidence of her affair, but nothing caught my eye. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was missing something important. Frank called me about talking to his friend, and I arranged to meet them at a bar across town after work the next day. To keep my investigation confidential, I informed Jamie that I had late-night appointments scheduled for the week. As I entered the dimly lit bar, I noticed Frank and his friend huddled in a secluded booth, each sipping a beer. Frank looked up as I approached and introduced his friend, Mark. We exchanged greetings, and I sat down opposite Frank, noticing the gloomy expressions on both their faces. Mark, having learned from Frank about my predicament, offered a few words of caution based on his own experience. He told how his wife cheated on him with her boss, and despite his initial attempts to reconcile, she eventually decided to leave. His gaze was intense as he advised me not to make rash decisions at the most crucial moment. I took revenge on her and her boss. I hurt him so that he would never hurt women again, but in the end, I served 5 years in prison and lost everything as a result of the force and the lawsuit. So, learn from my mistakes and don't do anything stupid. If you had the chance, would you have acted differently? For example, would you have tried to reconcile with your wife, or would you have divorced her from the very beginning? I was thinking of meeting her boss more covertly to catch him off guard before he realized what was going on. There was bitterness and hostility in his tone towards the man who stole his wife from him. As for my own wife, knowing what I currently know, I would immediately file for divorce. We discussed the necessary further actions, starting with collecting concrete evidence of her infidelity in order to present her with indisputable evidence and understand her rights in this situation. The next suggestion was to keep a significant amount of cash with me in case my wife finds out about my actions and freezes all our accounts and credit cards. The fourth suggestion was to rent a small apartment or find alternative housing options in case I need to stay somewhere if I decide to leave. Although these were all practical ideas, I thought I could just talk to my wife and resolve the situation. But as soon as I started talking about it, Mark slammed his fist on the table, reminding me of his warning not to do anything stupid. I have a feeling that her new boyfriend is filling her head with sweet words about how much he cares about her, while her husband is most likely off on his trip fooling around with some young girl he picked up in a bar. Before you come into conflict with your wife, make sure you understand what this guy said to her. Have you ever served in the army? This question took me by surprise. Yes, I served in the Marine Corps. Then Mark asked, what do you need before you go into battle? I thought for a moment before answering. Good intelligence, information about the enemy. There was a loud agreement in response. To understand the situation, it is necessary to collect reliable information, treat this as a strategic battle, and develop a plan in case of possible complications. Be prepared to deal with the consequences and have a clear direction forward. It's hard to accept that my wife could betray me like that, even though we were outwardly happy with each other. Mark expressed his condolences, acknowledging that even strong marriages can face difficulties. After some silence, Frank finally broke the silence with his own words. What's your plan of action? How are you going to resolve this situation? I already knew what to do. My first priority is to save my marriage if possible, but I also want the man who tried to steal my wife to be punished so that I don't go to jail. Mark chuckled at my comment about prison. But before I get down to business, I need evidence and information about my opponent. Do you have any ideas how to assemble them? It would be better if you did it yourself, taking the time and being observant. I would not recommend hiring a private investigator, as I have not had success with them in the past despite the fact that I have spent a lot of money. You have access to her bank accounts, credit card accounts, and phone records, so maybe you can find what you need there. First of all, we need to check if she has made any unusual purchases or phone calls. It will also be useful to check if she has a second mobile phone and collect all the numbers from it. It would be nice to install hidden video cameras around the house that can record both video and audio. It's important to catch them in the act, especially if they're doing something in your own bed. I don't like the idea that she could use our bed for this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. I raised my hand, making it clear that it would not hurt to listen to the information in order to make a plan of revenge. After an hour of conversation, I mentally wrote down Mark's advice. He warned me not to talk to anyone at work until I found out who she was seeing, as it could be someone who knows my schedule. If I had revealed my intentions too early, the game would have been ruined. Mark also offered a more subtle approach to his wife's lover, making me think about how to get back at this man. But I needed more information and help. The next day at work, I carefully analyzed my travel plans for the next month. I had 2 business trips planned, one of which lasted only a couple of days. I needed to hide any changes in my schedule from my colleagues, so I turned to my boss to discuss the possibility of extending my stay with a client not for 2 days, but for a whole week. My boss supported this idea and didn't see any problems with it. The next step was to make it look like I was there and then come back and go unnoticed. To do this, I purchased a prepaid debit card with cash and used it to buy a return ticket for another airline flight. After searching the internet, I purchased several spy cameras and a high-quality camera with excellent zoom and the ability to shoot in low-light conditions. This was just the first step in my plan to uncover the identity of the culprit and collect as much information about him as possible. The next step was to videotape their actions in order to irrefutably prove the fact of her betrayal. Throughout the day, I carefully developed a strategy and plan using my planning skills, but the most important missing information remained: who is this mysterious man? Until I can answer this question, I won't be able to trust anyone, not even my best friend and boss, Hal. I knew it would take a long time to figure out the identity of this jerk, but I was determined to do it by the end of the week. All the items I bought were delivered to Frank's house. The next step was the strategic installation of spy cameras throughout the house. Fortunately, Jamie and the girls planned to go shopping on Saturday, and I had the opportunity to work without interference. After a few hours, I successfully placed and tested all the cameras. I could even watch the live stream from my tablet or laptop, which allowed me to see exactly what was happening at every moment. After installing the cameras, I began combing the house for clues. First, I examined the credit card statements for unusual expenses and then moved on to inspect her closets for recent purchases, especially the raciest ones. Among several new items, I came across a strikingly short red dress that was unlike any I had seen her wear before. It intrigued me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of possessiveness, wishing it was just for me and for no one else. Although my investigation did not provide any concrete evidence, the presence of the dress was noticeably different from her usual style. Feeling depressed, I decided to clear my mind with a femme run in sneakers and shorts. Running has always helped me think more clearly. When I got home, Jamie's car met me in the driveway, which indicated that my loved ones were at home. I entered the house to the sound of their voices and laughter, which instantly lifted my spirits. I called Jamie, and my girls ran to me with delight to tell me about their day. Jamie came out of the kitchen and asked, "How was your run?" She kissed me on the cheek and gently escorted the girls out of the room. Everything was fine, but I really need a shower, I said, taking off my shoes. "What's for dinner?" I asked, already anticipating a delicious meal. "Pork chops," she replied with a smile. "I hope you're hungry." With that, she returned to the kitchen to finish cooking. After a shower and a hearty dinner, we put the girls to bed and settled down in the family room to watch TV. I was lost in thought, thinking about what she was doing while I was on the road. My head was spinning, and I decided to go to bed early. In our bedroom, I noticed her purse lying on the dresser. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to look for answers. To my surprise, I found a cell phone hidden inside that I had never seen before. Without hesitation, I turned it on and quickly wrote down the number. Then I checked the call log. There was only one number, which I also wrote down before turning off the phone. The realization of this fact hit me like a brick blow. She really was having an affair. I felt empty and full of anger at the person who was in a relationship with her, but then I remembered Mark's advice not to do anything stupid. I knew I had to stall for time to get revenge. I quickly changed my clothes and went to bed. When Jamie went upstairs, I pretended to be asleep to avoid talking. The following days were difficult, and I tried to behave as usual despite the discovery of incriminating evidence. Finally, it was time for another business trip, and I went about my usual business. I packed my things in the car and was ready to leave for a week. Saying goodbye, I casually asked, "Do you have any plans?" Her reaction was strange, and I realized that I had never asked this question before. I quickly tried to hide my gaffe by assuming, "I thought maybe you and the girls were planning something," hurriedly saying goodbye. I drove to the airport, mentally worrying about the cameras I had installed in our house. I hoped she would have the decency to keep him out of our bed, but before all this started, I was sure she would never cheat on me. Over the next few days, I quickly completed my work with this client and began preparing to return home. In the evening, watching the video from the cameras, I did not notice anything unusual. Curious, I decided to check the notes I had made earlier. The system was set up in such a way that recording started when someone entered the room where the camera was installed, and all recordings were stored on a device that I could access remotely. Looking through the recordings of that day, I noticed that Jim was using his secret mobile phone. Intrigued, I rewound the video to watch her answer the call and then played it back at normal speed. Despite the poor sound quality, I managed to catch fragments of her conversation. "Hello, baby. No, he's not coming until the end of the week. You know we can't do that." "Why not?" "Because one of the neighbors might see you." "Listen, I'll meet you at the motel." "No," she laughed, "I won't review it." She then turned away from the camera, and the rest of the conversation could not be heard. When she turned back to face the camera, she said, "Okay, but be careful. Park on the next street at a coffee shop a few blocks away." She added, "Okay, baby, I can't wait. See you tomorrow night." I was shocked. That bastard was going to be in my house, in our bed. Thoughts of getting rid of him flashed through my head. Then I remembered Mark's warning, "Don't do anything stupid." I tried my best to suppress my anger and delay the time until the right moment, but the severity of the situation was becoming unbearable. How could my own wife, the woman I loved and cherished, the mother of our children, betray me like that? What did I do to push her into the arms of another man? The flight home went too fast, and I was not mentally prepared for the confrontation that awaited me. In search of clarity, I checked into a hotel to think about my next steps. I knew that he would visit our house tonight, and I was determined to meet him face to face. Was he an acquaintance of mine or maybe a work colleague? Finding out his identity was crucial to determining my next steps. Not knowing the time of his arrival, I waited for him at the coffee shop on the next street, where he eventually parked. Despite not knowing his appearance, I took precautions. I rented a car at the airport and found a place with a good view of the parking lot. Armed with a camera, I tested the zoom capabilities to capture his face and license plate from at least 100 yards away. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, a silver BMW M3 drove into the parking lot. I quickly took a few pictures since the good lighting allowed me to see the driver's face well. I didn't recognize him at all. He parked on the opposite side of the parking lot from the coffee shop and started walking towards my house. It took me a while to calm my anger while sitting still. I connected to the Wi-Fi in the coffee shop and checked the surveillance cameras in my house. I watched him for a few minutes before I saw him come in and kiss my wife passionately. My blood froze in my veins, and I could hardly restrain the urge to run out and attack him with my bare hands. I sat and tried to eavesdrop on their conversation. "Hi, baby, I've missed you all day," he said before kissing her again. She mentioned that she sent the children to her parents for the night and won't be back until Friday, so they'll have the house to themselves until the next morning. How prudently she sent the children away. I caught a glimpse of him starting to undress my wife in our living room. She quickly followed suit, and within minutes, they were both naked, exploring each other's bodies. She broke away from his embrace, inviting them to continue their pleasures in the bedroom, and disappeared from the camera's field of view, heading for the stairs. He followed her, and their laughter echoed through the house. Their discarded clothes were lying on the floor. Fortunately for me, I hurriedly got out of the car and headed for the house. The front door was left unlocked, a clear sign that they were in a hurry to get into the bedroom. This made my task much easier. I immediately reached into his trousers and found a wallet which contained all the necessary information and even more. With my wallet in my hands, I headed to my home office located on the second floor, away from our bedroom so that I would not be overheard. I turned on the computer, printer, and scanner and waited for them to boot up. As soon as they were ready, I started scanning documents from Stephen Bannister's wallet, making copies of his driver's license and other documents. Quickly returning the wallet to its rightful place, I began to photograph the clothes scattered on the floor. Switching the cameras to video mode, I silently continued filming as I climbed the stairs. When I reached the top step, I heard the faint sounds of their lovemaking, which made my stomach rumble. Glancing at our bedroom door, I noticed that it was wide open. They assumed that the house was empty, but this was clearly not the case. I slowly approached the bedroom, the voices inside getting louder with each step. Standing in the doorway, I saw that Steve was lying on our marital bed, and my wife was on him, giving each other pleasure. They were so engrossed in their actions that I managed to enter the room unnoticed. Knowing that hidden cameras are of low quality, I wanted to capture this moment in high resolution. I recorded a few minutes of their closeness before I decided I'd seen enough. The urge to grab a baseball bat and confront Steve crossed my mind again, but wise advice pierced through my anger. Hurriedly, I left the room, trying not to make any impulsive decisions. As I drove back to the hotel, my thoughts were in turmoil, and my anger reached a boiling point. I couldn't recall ever being so furious, and it was starting to concern me. I called Frank and shared all the information I had gathered, including my actions. He praised my efforts but noted the risks involved in breaking into the house. Apologizing once again, he offered his assistance in any way he could. Frank was a reliable friend, one I could always turn to. Now, I need to talk to someone. I also want to meet Mark and ask him for a favor. Could you check if he's available for a meeting this weekend? I asked Frank. Of course, I will, Frank replied. Mark said he's ready to help you. After speaking with Frank, I attempted to get some rest, but sleep eluded me despite my exhaustion. Eventually, I decided to go for my usual morning run to clear my head and release my pent-up frustration. Unfortunately, the run didn't offer much relief. So, I opted for a shower and a nap to compensate for the lack of sleep the previous night. After returning the rented car to the airport, I retrieved my car and immediately drove to the office to speak with Hal. It was crucial for me to discuss reducing travel for work. Entering Hal's office and closing the door behind me, I asked, "Do you have a minute to talk?" "Of course, Logan." "Is everything okay?" Hal inquired. "My wife urges me to reduce the number of work trips." "I really need to be home more often," I explained, looking at Hal expectantly. "You're right. Your promotion has been given the green light, so you'll be out of the office most of the time after the upcoming trip. You may have to make 1 or 2 trips a year, but no more frequent than that. How does that sound?" Hal responded. I stared into space, unable to digest the news. "It sounds fantastic." "Thank you," I managed to reply. Noticing my concern, Hal asked, "Logan, is everything okay? You haven't seemed like yourself lately." Worried, I decided to confide in him. "My wife is having an affair. Last night, I saw her with her lover and captured them on video." Hal stared at me in shock. "Oh my God, Logan. I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry. How can I help you? You gave me exactly what I needed, an excuse to stay at home and work on saving my marriage. Please don't tell anyone in the office about this. I still don't know who this guy is or if he has any connections here," I pleaded. "Okay, I won't say a word," Hal assured me. "Do you really think someone from our team is behind this? Now, I feel insecure about everything. If I need a break, I'll ask you to cover for me. I want my wife to believe that I'm still on a business trip so that I can gather more evidence against her. Can you help me with this?" I asked Hal. "Of course, I can help. But what are your plans for the future?" Hal inquired. "I just want to gather enough evidence to prove her infidelity. I hope to save my marriage, but if that fails, I want to protect myself in a divorce." "I have to be ready," I replied. Okay, just let me know when you need a day off, and we'll make it look like you're on another business trip, Hal agreed. Thanking Hal, I left his office with a feeling of slight relief. Everything was starting to make sense, although I claimed that I was working to save my marriage. In fact, it was already over. That evening at home, I bravely looked at my children, trying to pretend that everything was fine. Their delight and love overwhelmed me, and I held back tears at the thought of how a possible divorce would affect them. The idea that I needed permission to meet my own children haunted me. On Sunday evening, my wife and I usually engaged in intimacy, but this time she did not feel very well, although this was not the first such case. It had been more than a month since our last intimacy. I was preparing for the upcoming trip and asked Hal for a week off, instructing the office to inform anyone who called that I was on a regular business trip. Hal didn't object to this arrangement and wished me luck. I knew I had to tell my wife the news that my next trip would be longer than usual. No wonder she wasn't thrilled. I know you don't like my frequent trips, but I promise it won't be for long. Soon, I'll be coming home so often that you'll get tired of seeing me, I teased. She didn't find it funny and just sighed. Call me as soon as you arrive, she said calmly. With these words, our marriage came to an end. I left quickly, not wanting to say something that I would regret later, and headed to the airport. The meetings with the clients went smoothly, and the deal was concluded ahead of schedule, which allowed me to return home earlier. I checked the cameras for a week, but he never returned to the house. However, I caught a glimpse of her talking on her secret cell phone. I listened to her conversation, realizing that this was the opportunity one had been waiting for. Despite the pain of hearing her plans, when I arrived at the office, I found that the items I had bought were already waiting for me. Knowing my wife's schedule, I strategically positioned one of the items so that she could not easily stumble upon it. Given her predictable daily routine at the gym, I knew exactly when and where to place the item so it wouldn't catch her eye. Armed with spare car keys, I tried to carry out my plan without unnecessary hassle. Later, I decided to check on Stephen at his apartment. When I noticed his car in the garage, I concluded that he was at home and began to discreetly monitor his location with a camera. I was incredibly lucky when I saw him through the sliding doors and discovered that he was not alone. He was accompanied by another woman, and it was obvious that they had a deep romantic relationship, expressing love in kisses and gentle touches. I secretly recorded their intimate moments, and it felt like a dream come true when they left together. I decided to follow them from a safe distance. They stopped for lunch, which gave me the perfect opportunity to discreetly place a certain item on his car. It was a risky move as I had to be careful not to let anyone see, but I managed to do it without arousing suspicion. Now I just had to wait, which was the most difficult task for me. Mark called and informed me about a friend I was supposed to meet. We decided to meet in my hotel room to avoid being seen in public, as I was involved in some illegal activity. They came to my room, and Mark introduced me to Joe, a computer hacker who could help me carry out my plan. They both nodded in agreement. Over the next hour, I told the whole story about my wife's infidelity and the man she was involved with. Then, I talked about my plan of revenge against the idiot who offended me, expressing the wish that it would be a long ordeal. As part of my plan, I revealed copies of the documents I took from Stephen's wallet. What you're asking for is risky and could land me in jail for a significant period of time if I get caught, he warned. And what do I get from it? Joe asked. After a moment's thought, I suggested, how do you like $5,000 in cash? Joe quickly agreed, insisting on receiving half in advance and the rest at the end of the assignment. Okay, that's fine with me, I agreed. To get access to his computer, we need to get inside the apartment. I also want to find additional evidence against my wife. After getting information about Stephen, Joe was able to use my laptop to study his latest purchases. The most notable were 2 air tickets to Las Vegas and a 5-night hotel reservation. This gave us the idea to plan a break-in of his apartment. Joe asked if there was an alarm system in the apartment, to which I admitted that I wasn't sure. He agreed to check the situation and report back to me. He mentioned that if an alarm system is installed in the house, he would have to charge more for helping us enter. I agreed to pay him more, but only if there were good reasons for such an increase. In case it looked like my wife was getting ready to leave with him and meeting this jerk was supposed to be her last, I checked if the tracking devices installed in their cars were working by looking at my tablet. These devices allowed me to track their location using a tablet or smartphone. In addition, I looked at the home surveillance footage and noticed that my wife had packed a small carry-on bag for the trip. On the appointed day, I watched their movements from a luxurious hotel room. I called Joe, who confirmed our meeting in the afternoon. He noted that he had not noticed any obvious alarm systems, but warned us to proceed with caution. When we met at Stephen's house, we thought out a plan to infiltrate. Joe, who learned this skill in prison, could pick locks. The dim evening light provided us with cover. Joe quickly knelt at the front door of Stephen's apartment and fumbled with the locks for almost a minute before successfully opening the door. We hurried inside, carefully checking for alarms before we found Stephen's computer. Fortunately, it was easily accessible, and Joe began to complete the task. "Wait," I interjected, taking out my phone to record a video in the room. "I want to make sure that we leave everything exactly as we found it." Joe agreed, nodding his approval of this precaution. If he doesn't see anything unusual, he won't suspect that anyone was here, and we'll have more time to carry out our plan to deceive him. I agree. "Let me use my magic," Joe said. "Why don't you look around and search for evidence that could incriminate him?" While exploring his house, I looked for any clues about his activities. After looking through the mail, I found bank statements, credit card accounts, and various other accounts, as well as regular junk mail. When I entered his bedroom, I couldn't help but notice how spotlessly clean and well-furnished the apartment was. Everything looked luxurious and expensive. I heard Joe exclaim, "I deserve it." I returned to the living room without any problems. I found that he often pays bills over the internet. In addition, I found his checks and additional credit cards that I was hoping to find. I have a card reader that can take all the data from the magnetic stripe on his credit cards. With this information, I can create duplicates of his cards, which will allow anyone with a copy to make purchases online. His cards can be easily emptied within a few hours, Joe grinned. "Can you empty his bank account?" I asked. "No problem," he replied. "I'll do it from this computer to make it look more legitimate." "If the bank calls to confirm the transaction, will they need a password?" "Not usually, but they can ask for his social security number, which you have." I took it from Stephen's wallet. "Come on, do what you need to do, but let's wait for the right moment to wreak havoc on this idiot. Let's empty his bank account now, and when he gets back from Las Vegas, we'll mess with his credit cards," I suggested. "I like this idea, a little surprise for his return," Joe said, already looking forward to it. "Just make sure it can't be traced back to us in any way." "Of course, it goes without saying. I don't want to get caught again, so I'm careful. Have you noticed why we're wearing these latex gloves?" Joe held up his hand, showing off the blue glove he was wearing. I kept searching his bedroom, but I didn't find anything special until I opened the back of the closet. Inside, I found a shoebox filled with VCR discs with women's names. I threw the box on his bed and started sorting them. None of the names caught my attention until I came across Jamie's name. This jerk secretly filmed them together, but for what purpose? "You have to come and see this," I insisted, curious. He followed me into another room. "What did you find?" Joe asked. "It looks like this guy is running a blackmail scheme. He has several videos of women engaging in intimate activities with Stephen. The women's faces are clearly visible, but Stephen remains hidden from prying eyes. Judging by some of the emails, it looks like he's extorting money from them. According to my version, he chooses married women with children, threatens them with exposure, and then starts blackmailing them with these videos. None of them want to get divorced, especially since these videos can be used as evidence against them in court. He seems like a good guy, but the payback is cruel." "Do you think he saved all the videos on his hard drive?" Joe asked. "I'm not sure, but I found some VCRs in his closet, so I think these are the only copies he has." As soon as you're done, don't forget to completely erase his hard drive so that no trace remains. Have you come across a backup disk? Joe asked. No, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have it. Now, I'll look around and try to find it. When I returned to the bedroom, I collected all the DVDs and used a backpack that I found in the closet to carry them. After searching the room, I found no additional evidence and returned to check on Joe. You were right. I found his backup disk. Great, make a full backup, erase the disk on his laptop, and we'll take his backup disk with us. But if we do that, he'll know that someone was here. I understand, but it's necessary. Now that his blackmail scheme has been uncovered, he will lose his source of income and eventually go bankrupt. I also want to assure these women that they no longer need to be afraid of him. Print out all the emails from these women. I can create an email inbox to let them know that they no longer need to pay this disgusting man. Since you're paying me, I can create an email account from his computer if you want. Let's get on with it, I said. When we finished, I took another look around the neighborhood, after which we closed up and quickly left, returning to the car. I handed Joe an envelope with the remaining money that was owed to him. Thanks for the help, I said gratefully. I'll call you when I'm ready to shell out all the money from his credit cards and really destroy this guy. Joe nodded in agreement, and we shook hands with pleasure. He assured me before leaving. I returned to the hotel to continue implementing my plan. First, I called my relatives to find out how my children were doing. My father-in-law picked up the phone and greeted me warmly. Dad, this is Logan, I said. I just wanted to know how the kids were doing. I hope they aren't giving you and Mom too much trouble, I said, trying to sound cheerful. Logan, they're both little angels. I hope Jamie is enjoying her girls' weekend. Have you talked to her today? He asked. No, not yet. I was going to make the next call. I just wanted to make sure the girls didn't cause any problems. They like to stay with their grandparents, I explained. After talking to Jim's father, it turned out that he had no idea that she was in Las Vegas with another man. I called her home first, knowing she wouldn't be there, and left a message. After waiting an hour and getting no answer, I called her on her cell phone. Again, she didn't reply, and I left a message expressing my concern. I mentioned that I had tried to call her at home and now on her mobile and asked her to call me back to let me know that she was okay. I also said that if there was no response from her within an hour, then I would contact her parents. 15 minutes later, my phone rang, and to my surprise, it was Jamie. I tried to call home, but you didn't answer the phone. Everything is fine. I was walking with my friends, and then I took the girls to their parents. I just needed a break from staying at home, she explained. When we were talking, she seemed a little tense. I can sympathize with her. I'll be back home in a week. Maybe we could go out together. What do you say? I suggested. Oh, that sounds good, she replied uncertainly. Jamie, is everything okay? It doesn't seem like you're excited about dating your own husband, I teased her, trying to make her a little nervous. Oh no, I'm just tired. I feel like I'm going to bed early tonight, she replied. Sure, baby. Go get some rest. Sweet dreams. I love you, I said before we hung up. Despite my mounting anger, I forced myself to remain calm. I didn't sleep well again, so I went for a morning run. Back in the room, I took a refreshing shower with pleasure. Then I called the office to make sure everything was going smoothly, and that's how it was. Then there was a terrible call that all parents are afraid of. Rebecca was injured at school and had to be rushed to the hospital. At that moment, nothing was more important to me than the well-being of my child. At first, the school called me at home, but when no one answered, they tried to contact me at work. A colleague from my office gave me a message. I immediately called the school back and found out that Rebecca had broken her arm and was now in the emergency room. Without hesitation, I rushed out the door and headed straight to the hospital. When I arrived at the hospital, I dialed Jamie's number, and when I didn't hear an answer, I left a voice message threatening to call a divorce lawyer if she didn't answer my call within the next 15 minutes. An hour later, Jamie finally called, but I ignored the call, sitting with my daughter who had a cast on her arm. She was crying for her mother, and I could hardly find words to comfort her. After a while, she calmed down, and I took her to her grandparents. My phone rang again, and I declined the call again. After I cleaned up, I contacted a reputable divorce lawyer and made an appointment for the next day. At that moment, Jamie called again. I picked up the phone. "Thank you for taking the time to contact me. How's Stephen doing? Did you manage to play blackjack? After you get home, the girls and I will move out. I've already contacted a divorce lawyer. I have incriminating videos of you and Stephen together, and I think it won't be difficult for me to get full custody of the children," she said. "Oh God, please, Logan, don't do this, please," she began to cry. "You seem to have forgotten that while you were in Las Vegas, your child was in the hospital, crying for his mother. Unfortunately, her mother was too involved with her lover and led a carefree life because she felt frisky, maybe with Stephen. You can start over and finally live the life you've always dreamed of. It's just a pity that your two daughters won't be with you, but you're still young, and I'm sure Stephen will be able to give you more children. I sincerely hope that you and Stephen will find happiness together. But Logan, it's you I love, and it's you I want," I said firmly. "I've had enough of talking," I continued. I took Rebecca and Amy home, helped them pack their things, and put them in their room next to mine. After that, I contacted Jamie's father to inform him about the situation at school and explained that at the moment, we would not be living at home until some issues are resolved. "Logan, what's going on? Do you have a problem with Jamie? While we're facing some difficulties, I suggest you talk to Jamie directly. In the meantime, the girls will stay with me to ensure their well-being and safety. I hope you understand the situation," he said. Although he didn't understand anything, he still wished us all the best and expressed hope that we could solve our problems. After that, I called my lawyer and asked him to serve my wife with a subpoena. First, I called Joe and asked him to take revenge on the one who insulted me, destroy this cron, empty his credit cards, empty his bank accounts, and destroy his credit by opening more cards and emptying them too. "I want him to get into debt," I said angrily. Joe grinned and replied with pleasure, "Dude, if you need to do anything else with this bastard, don't hesitate to call me. I won't take any money from you." Later, Jamie called me that evening. I ignored the call at first, but her text message made me change my mind. "I'm in trouble, please call," it said. When I called back, she was in tears. "If your tears are causing problems, then I'm not interested," I began, but then she explained that he was blackmailing her. "He's threatening to share the Vegas video if I don't do what he says," she said quickly. "Your Prince Charming is a blackmailer now. Get over it," I said before hanging up. I had a premonition that this moment would come, but Jamie had to face the consequences firsthand. Home and marriage were her refuge, but she decided to leave and go on her own adventures, and now she will have to answer for it. Although I was pleased to see Jamie suffer, I still had to find her a handsome prince. That's why I contacted Joe. I contacted my lawyer later to get the necessary documents for Jamie, which will take several days. In the meantime, I plan to transfer my money offshore. It's just my money, and I intend to give Jamie something she doesn't deserve. "Are you sure about this?" my lawyer asked. "Yes, I've had enough. Besides, there's something else I need to discuss with you. The plan has changed a bit." "Let's meet at 5, I replied. Later, we met at a bar and had a long conversation, almost 2 hours. We shook hands, and I handed him a thick envelope. Over the next 3 days, Jamie called repeatedly, but I ignored her, wanting her to feel the pain. Finally, on Friday evening, I got a call which I was looking forward to. It was a video call. When I picked up the phone, I found a man tied to a chair. "My friend has a message for you," said a voice in the background. The man raised his head with difficulty and looked at the screen. Hi, Stephen. It looks like you had a good time in Tijuana. I understand that traveling in a confined space can be exhausting, but I'm sure fatigue is the least of your worries right now. It will also help you hide from the bank to which you owe a significant amount of money. Are you familiar with Santiago? He is known as El Poalo. He makes a stew, a unique stew. You'll find out soon enough. I could easily sue you for alienation of affection and maybe get money from you, but it would take too long, and I don't want to waste my time on you or my stupid wife. So I guess this is goodbye, Mr. Lopez. You can take him away. The last time I saw Stephen, there was fear in his eyes. It was a good investment for me. He disappeared without a trace, and no one bothered to inquire about his whereabouts. 7 months later, I was finally released from marriage and given custody of my daughters. I was allowed to keep the house until my daughters turned 19, after which we could sell it and split the profits. There was no alimony or child support. I didn't want anything to do with Jamie, but she still had the right to date girls. I would bring them to her house and leave quickly. A year later, I started dating Lisa, who was Amy's school teacher. Amy seemed to enjoy her company. I haven't thought about getting married yet because I didn't want to rush it. As for Jamie, things are not going well for her. As it turned out, she got into huge debts that I didn't even know about. She took money from influential people and now fulfills her debt by selling her love and body.